Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Estella was clearly alarmed by what Roxanne said. She couldn't stop crying and shaking her head. Roxanne wiped the girl's tears away and uttered softly, "In that case, don't cry anymore." Archie and Benny helped do the same. After Roxanne said she liked Estella, the two of them repeated their mother's sentiment. "It doesn't matter what our relationship is. We'll still like you, Essie." While that stopped Estella from sobbing further, she still felt quite upset. But if I change school, I won't be able to see you two anymore." Benny promised, "Even if you do, we'll still visit you to play with you. If Mr. Farwell and the others forbid us from doing so, we'll just sneak our way in." Having listened to the conversation among the children, Roxanne thought, "I don't think I'll let them meet each other again after this." However, Estella seemed to be moved. Roxanne didn't want to burst their bubbles, so she agreed with her silence. The three of them talked with Estella for a long while, and only then was her mood finally lifted again. Benny recounted everything interesting that had happened in the kindergarten over the past 2 days. When Roxanne finally saw Estella smiling from listening to Benny's story, she breathed a sigh of relief. "You should keep her company for a while, Archie. I have something I need Benny's help with." She was still wondering why Benny had called Lucian Daddy and wanted to ask him about it. The kids were in a happy mood at that moment, so none of them gave her statement much thought. Benny merely thought his mother needed his aid to decoding something again, so he followed her upstairs enthusiastically. It wasn't until he noticed that his mother was heading toward their bedroom instead of the study that he started to feel guilty. After he entered the room, she closed the door. "Your mommy." Benny lowered his head guiltily. Seeing that, Roxanne felt something was amiss. She knew the children too well. She could tell from a glance what he was feeling. Suddenly, she panicked a little. However, lest she misunderstood the boy, she asked, "Earlier, why did you suddenly call Mr. Farwell Daddy?" Benny lowered his head and was at a loss for words. He was great at computers, but not confrontations like those. In the past, his brother would always help him navigate through situations like those, but at that moment, he was alone. He knew his mother was smart. If he answered her question too slowly, she would get suspicious. At that thought, he could only steel himself and utter, "I didn't call Mr. Farwell Daddy. I just wanted to say that he's Essie's daddy and that he can't make her cry." He raised his head to look at Roxanne's countenance. But I got a little too anxious and only remembered to say the words daddy." Roxanne knitted her eyebrows slightly, unsure of what to believe. The children were shocked by what happened earlier, and Benny's answer does make sense. However, I can't help but feel that something's off. Also, seeing that his mother was still skeptical of the matter, Benny had a brilliant idea and started acting pitifully. "When I saw Mr. Farwell hugging Essie, I thought Archie and I would be hugged the same way if our daddy was still alive." That hit a soft spot in Roxanne's heart. She put away her suspicions and stared at her boy apologetically. "I'm sorry." Roxanne lowered her head. Upon hearing that, Benny knew Roxanne had bought his lie and let out a sigh of relief in secret. He lowered his guard even further when he heard his mother apologizing to him. He tugged her sleeve obediently. "I don't blame you, Mommy." Roxanne forced a smile, but she still felt remorseful. Benny tilted his head and blurted out his thoughts. "If you really feel sorry, make Mr. Farwell our daddy. Archie and I like him a lot." Roxanne's heart clenched when she heard that. It was the first time she had heard the boy express his opinion about Lucian to her. Is it because they're related by blood that they love him so much? Roxanne felt the urge to tell Benny about his background, but then she thought about her relationship with Lucian. If Lucian learns that the boys are his children, he won't let them stay by my side. At that thought, she pinched her palm silently and swallowed the words on the tip of her tongue. "Mr. Farwell is going to marry someone else in the future, and there's nothing I can do about it." She patted his head comfortingly. However, I can promise you that your future daddy will be someone you and your brother will like. Naturally, Benny was disappointed when his proposal was rejected by his mother. However, he found himself understanding his mother's decision when he recalled her precarious relationship with his father. He was determined to help his parents reconcile with each other. Unwilling to face Benny's disappointed countenance, Roxanne stood up and grabbed his tiny hand. Come on. Let's head back to Essie. The boy bobbed his head and followed her downstairs. Archie and Estella were planning how to encourage their parents to make peace with each other. When they heard footsteps, they swiftly separated from one another like frightened little animals and sat on the couch, acting as though nothing had happened. Roxanne stared at them with amusement. What secrets were you two talking about? Calmly, Archie replied, I was just telling Essie that Benny is very good with computers. Estella nodded in cooperation. I'm great at it, too. Roxanne turned to the girl, surprised. No one would have expected someone as adorable and innocent, looking as her to be skilled at computers. I certainly didn't. Then again, she is Lucian's child. In that context, it's not shocking to learn she has a very high IQ. What did you need Benny's help with, Miss Jarvis? If he can't help you, maybe I can give it a try, Estella offered. Roxanne glanced at Benny before grinning at the other children. It's nothing much. I'm not that familiar with computers, so I asked him to teach me a thing or two about a problem I was having. Benny nodded in agreement. While Estella didn't think much about her lie, Archie had a good guess why his mother had asked his brother for help. He was slightly worried as he wondered how Benny had answered her questions. He noticed his little brother's expression appeared a bit odd. He didn't spill the beans, did he? He couldn't help but panic. When Benny sat by his side, he asked in a whisper, did you let it slip? He only relaxed when his brother assured him that didn't happen. The brothers played with Estella until very late into the night because she would be leaving the next day. It was only when Roxanne went to the boys' bedroom to call for Estella that she reluctantly left. Roxanne wondered what the children talked about when she noticed how spirited Estella appeared upon returning to her bedroom. Miss Jarvis, Estella called out in her piping voice abruptly while Roxanne was helping her take a bath. Roxanne stopped what she was doing and looked at Estella in confusion. The girl stared at her with wide eyes and asked, Can you really not be my mommy, Miss Jarvis? Earlier, while she was still crying, she had already asked that question, and Roxanne had already answered no. Roxanne was surprised the girl would ask that again. Afraid that her answer would cause Estella to cry once more, she contemplated the words she should use. Estella, however, seemed to have known Roxanne's answer. She lowered her eyes and said aggrievedly, I know you don't like Daddy because he keeps angering you, Miss Jarvis, and I'm Daddy's daughter. You will definitely not want to become my mommy. That's not what I meant. It's just that your daddy is already engaged to someone, so he has to marry that person in the future. The girl's eyes lit up. This means you actually like Daddy. Hearing that rendered Roxanne speechless for a few moments. The children always have a false dichotomous perspective on everything. Just because I denied the claim that I disliked Lucian, she thought I actually liked him, and I couldn't be with him solely because of Aubrey. If I rebut her again, it'll be the same as admitting I dislike Lucian and, consequently, her as well. At that moment, she had no idea how to explain the situation properly to the girl. Estella scrutinized Roxanne's expression. When she saw the troubled look on the woman's face, a sly glint flashed past her eyes. She recalled the plan she had devised with the boys. Miss Jarvis and Daddy had a heated argument that they still haven't gotten over. We need to come up with a plan to make them reconcile quickly. It's Daddy's fault for pissing you off, Miss Jarvis. I'll teach Daddy a lesson on your behalf. Roxanne had no rebuttals to offer. It's like she's implying Lucian and I are already a thing. Essie. She changed the topic resignedly. It's getting late. Let's hurry so you can rest early. Estella beamed, although it was difficult to tell if it was because she had fun talking about the matter or because Roxanne did not deny her conclusion. In response to Roxanne's words, the girl nodded obediently. Roxanne was a little absent-minded as she dried Estella with a towel because her mind was still distracted by the emotions the girl had elicited in her. I want to listen to Sleeping Beauty, Miss Jarvis. Proactively, Estella crawled up to the bed and stared at the woman with anticipation, as if stars were hiding in her eyes. Sleeping Beauty. Roxanne's mind was thrown into further chaos as she inadvertently recalled the play from before. However, she couldn't bear to reject the girl's request when she saw how excited the latter was. As she narrated the fairy tale, the events that took place during the play repeated in her mind like a movie. When she reached the kissing scene, she found it hard to continue the story. Thankfully, the girl had already fallen asleep. After releasing a sigh of relief, Roxanne lay beside Estella with a complicated feeling. The next morning, when Roxanne woke up early, Estella was still asleep. She left the bed gently to avoid disturbing the girl and went downstairs to prepare the children's breakfast. Because of the messy situation last night, she woke up a little later than usual even though she was awake before the children. She hadn't even prepared breakfast when the doorbell rang. Roxanne stopped what she was doing, and her heart sank. Is Lucien that eager to bring Essie back home? The doorbell rang incessantly, which roused the children from their slumber and prompted them to descend the stairs. Is Mr. Farwell here, Mommy? Archie frowned at the entrance. Estella's gleeful countenance from yesterday had been replaced with a pitiful expression as she stood behind the boys. I want to stay with Archie and Benny longer. Seeing that the children had arrived downstairs, Roxanne had no choice but to put the things in her hands down and open the door. Mr. Fair. Roxanne cut herself off when she realized the visitor wasn't who she thought it was. Why are you here, Mr. Damaris? Jack was holding a bouquet of baby's breath with a warm smile. I was worried when you didn't come yesterday or explain why you couldn't make it, so I decided to visit early in the morning. I didn't disturb your rest, did I? As he spoke, he looked inside the living room and saw 3 children staring at him warily. He couldn't help but be taken aback at the sight of the kids. They are. When the children snapped back to reality, they politely but distantly greeted Jack. Hello, Mr. Damaris. Estella was unfamiliar with Jack, but she still greeted him with the boys. Jack nodded with a smile. A good morning to you 3. Then he raised his eyebrow at Roxanne. The girl is Mr. Farwell's daughter, isn't she? Roxanne hesitated for a few seconds before inclining her head. As she came here to play with Archie and Benny. He's aware the 3 of them are in the same class, although I don't know if he'd believe what I just said. She lowered her eyes guiltily, afraid he would notice anything unusual. Thankfully, Jack simply nodded meaningfully and sized her up. I thought you didn't show up yesterday because you were sick. It seems that my concern is unfounded. Sorry for worrying you, Mr. Damaris. Roxanne gave a small smile, then looked at the flowers in his hand in puzzlement. Jack handed the flowers to her after detecting her apparent interest in them. I thought you were feeling unwell, but I wasn't sure what to bring when visiting you, so I brought you these flowers. I hope you don't dislike them. Roxanne was slightly stunned, her heart filled with hesitation. It sounds reasonable, but accepting his flowers in front of the children is a little. I'm afraid they'll misunderstand something. Just as she wondered what to do, Estella trotted toward her and tugged her shirt. Miss Jarvis. Roxanne lowered her eyes. Estella rubbed her tummy and whined, I'm hungry. Roxanne smiled apologetically at Estella before turning her attention back to Jack. Sorry, I woke up a little late today. I haven't prepared their breakfasts. Please, come in and sit with us. Sure. Roxanne released a sigh of relief in her heart as she stepped into the kitchen alone. Thank goodness Essie came to my rescue. I hope Jack won't think I was being impertinent for not directly accepting his flowers. Inside the living room, When Jack sat on the couch, he placed the flowers in his hand next to him. The children looked at him from a distance. Upon sensing their gaze, Jack lifted his eyebrow and faced the boys. Do you too like the presents I gifted you? The boys exchanged a glance. They didn't open Jack's gifts because they saw him as a potential love rival to Lucian. Despite their animosity toward him, they felt compelled to answer his question amiably. Archie smiled at him. It's really fun. Thank you, Mr. Damaris. Hearing that, Estella snorted imperceptibly. While it was the first time she had met Jack, the alarm bells in her mind hadn't stopped ringing since he first appeared. This guy is doing the same thing Daddy did when he was courting Ms. Jarvis. He visited Ms. Jarvis early in the morning because he was supposedly concerned about her health. Then, he openly gifted her flowers. He must be pursuing Ms. Jarvis. She was enraged as she thought about how proactive Jack was and how her father was still angry at Roxanne. Archie and Benny could tell she was furious, and why. Mr. Damaris, I once saw on the television that flowers are only given to people you like. So why did you buy Mommy flowers? Benny started. Jack was stunned for a moment. Friends can give each other flowers too. Benny ignored his response and continued. Gee, if you like Mommy, I suggest you give up because she already has someone in her heart. Surprise flashed past the man's eyes as he stared at the boy with intrigue. Ayo. Benny met Jack's eyes assertively and proclaimed, Mommy likes Daddy. Roxanne's expression changed when she stepped out of the kitchen and heard that. What are you talking about, Benny? The boy pouted and said seriously, isn't that true? If you don't like Daddy, then how are we born? While the boys did not know who their father was, Roxanne did. Then, as she related Benny's words to what Estella said last night, she felt a peculiar sensation swelling in her. As she didn't feel it was appropriate for her to refute Benny's words, she mentioned breakfast instead. All right, that's enough. Essie's hungry. Let's eat first. Only then did the children cave in and line up next to the dining table, waiting to be seated. Roxanne turned to Jack and offered politely, Have you eaten, Mr. Damaris? Join us if you haven't. The moment the children heard Roxanne's invitation, they halted their movements and looked at the man on the couch. Jack pursed his lips upon spotting the children's look. No, thanks. I already ate before I came. It was only then the children returned to whatever they were doing. Roxanne nodded at him and enjoyed breakfast with the children. However, because of Jack's presence, the children ate inattentively. After breakfast, Roxanne was afraid the children would say anything inappropriate, so she asked them to play outside. Jack was still waiting in the living room. She cleaned up the dining room, then sat next to him. The mother of Mr. Farwell's daughter has always been mysterious. Jack's voice rang out abruptly. Roxanne was stunned. She did not understand why he suddenly brought that topic up. Studying her expression, he resumed, If not for the fact that you already have 2 children, I would think you're the mother of his daughter. That's impossible. Don't say nonsense like that, Mr. Damaris, Roxanne quickly denied. You two resemble each other. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it. Good-looking people tend to have similar features, after all. Jack smiled, his words seemingly ambiguous and implying something. Furrowing her eyebrows slightly, Roxanne kept her composure and changed the topic. How did the medical consultation go yesterday, by the way? Jack sensed her anxiety and gazed at her meaningfully for a few seconds, making her feel uneasy. Fortunately for her, he went along with her wishes and changed the topic. The children were feeling a little unhappy as they gathered in front of the mansion entrance. Estella knitted her eyebrows as she stared at the boys. Does Mr. Damaris have a good relationship with Ms. Jarvis? The boys exchanged a glance, uncertain of what to say. They didn't want to tell her Jack was Lucian's potential love rival and had a good relationship with Roxanne, as they were uncertain how that knowledge would affect her unstable mood. Mommy said they're colleagues. She's been fairly busy with work lately, so they've been interacting with each other more frequently, Archie said. Estella pursed her lips and stared at the entrance, skeptical of Archie's words. Why would he, a mere co-worker, send Miss Jarvis flowers? Daddy has many colleagues, yet he never gave any of them flowers. I wonder what Miss Jarvis is talking about with Mr. Damaris inside. Also, why did she chase us out? The more she thought about it, the more worried she was. The boys' hearts sank when they sensed Estella's foul mood. The three children gazed at the entrance with great bitterness and deep hatred, wishing they could run straight to Roxanne's side and monitor her interaction with Jack. After a while, the boys made a decision and said, how about we go in right now? However, when they turned around, they realized Estella was gone. Essie. Archie and Benny combed the courtyard to look for her. Estella was squatting next to Jack's car, doing something. The moment she heard their voices, she wrapped up her task, concealed her tools, and hid behind Jack's car. As Archie moved closer, she abruptly ran out from behind the car. Oh, why are you here, Essie? Archie's eyes lit up. Estella lowered her head guiltily and muttered, I just want to play hide and seek. Archie took in the girl's expression. While he found her demeanor odd, he didn't give it too much thought. If you want to play hide and seek, we can play with you, but you must inform us beforehand if you're going somewhere next time. Estella nodded obediently. After Archie found Estella, he summoned Benny. Let's head inside and listen to what Mommy is talking about with Mr. Damaris. Upon hearing that suggestion, the other two agreed. They opened the door carefully and saw Roxanne sitting on the single-seat couch and chatting with Jack. Both adults had a smile on their faces. The alarm bells in the children's minds rang loudly the instant they noticed the faint smile on Roxanne's face. Estella acted against her usual behavior and sprinted straight to Roxanne's side. Essie. It was only then Roxanne noticed the children had returned. Jack gave Roxanne and Estella the once-over and said half-intentionally, I can see the resemblance even clearer like this. That sent Roxanne into a panic. Innocently, Estella asked Roxanne, what resemblance, Miss Jarvis? Roxanne patted her head, shot a look at Jack, and said, it's nothing. It's just a random comment from Mr. Damaris. Then she stood up and faced Jack. Is there anything else, Mr. Damaris? Of course, as a veteran in the business industry, he could tell she was hinting for him to leave. He smiled at the kids and said, it's almost noon. Even though I've known the boys for a long while now, I still haven't had the chance to treat them to a meal. How about we all have lunch together today? Then he looked at Estella meaningfully. It just so happens that Mr. Farwell's daughter is here, so consider this my invitation to him for a meal. Roxanne felt uncomfortable upon hearing that. Is he implying something? Also, his pretext for inviting the children to lunch is so strange. At that thought, she was ready to reject the offer on the children's behalf. To her surprise, before she could speak, Estella's voice rang out. Thank you, Mr. Damaris, but I much prefer Ms. Jarvis cooking. The boys nodded in agreement. Their rejection was direct, which prompted Jack to raise his eyebrow. Roxanne was stunned for a few seconds before she returned to her senses and smiled at Jack apologetically. I'm sorry. Mr. Farwell will be here soon to pick up Essie, so there's not enough time for lunch outside. Next time, perhaps. Jack nodded nonchalantly and rose to his feet. Very well, then. I'll take my leave now. Roxanne proceeded to send him out with the children. Once Jack's car was far enough away, the children glanced at Roxanne before returning to the living room in unison. The sight of the flowers still lying on the couch made their faces fall. Roxanne was confounded by their reaction until she realized they were staring at the flowers. She could tell what the children were thinking. They want me to be with Lucian. While I don't think of Jack the way they assume I do, I don't have a future with Lucian. Yet, I can't help but feel guilty when I face them. Miss Jarvis. Estella lowered her eyes with disappointment and tugged at the hem of Roxanne's shirt. Squatting down, Roxanne looked at her. What's the matter? Is it because you want to be with Mr. Damaris that you can't be my mommy? The girl sounded aggrieved. Roxanne was taken aback by that question. Mr. Damaris and I are only friends. You accepted Mr. Damaris' flower but not Daddy's. I still remember Miss Jarvis almost returned the roses Daddy bought for her when we went to a concert. For a moment, Roxanne wasn't sure how to answer that question. Her conversation about work with Jack and the sudden return of the children had diverted her attention from the presence of the flowers. She had completely forgotten about it. If the children hadn't cared so much about it, she wouldn't have remembered it. Roxanne's silence prompted Estella to tilt her head thoughtfully and question. Is it because you like baby's breath and not roses? Yes, Roxanne blurted out. That answer brought a smile to Estella's face again. However, she still found the sight of the flowers to be an eyesore. The boys also detested the flower, so they put it in a corner. This is taking up space. Let's put it here first. Roxanne was aware of her son's intentions, but she didn't comment on it. Suddenly, the doorbell rang again. The brothers tensed up as they subconsciously protected Estella behind them. If Mr. Damaris was the one who pressed the doorbell earlier, then this must be Mr. Farwell. We still haven't played hide and seek with Essie yet. Roxanne thought the same, but despite her unwillingness to let Estella leave, she still opened the door. When she saw the person at the door, she was puzzled. Mr. Damaris? Why are you back here? Is there anything else? Jack smiled helplessly. I may need to stay at your place for a while, because someone punctured my tire with a nail. It went flat after I drove for a while. As he spoke, he glanced at the children somewhat intentionally. Without hesitation, Roxanne let him in. Jack wondered out loud, it's strange. The tire was fine when I came by in the morning. I don't know when it was punctured by a nail. Upon detecting his stare, the boys looked back at him confidently. Why is he looking at us? We didn't do anything. Is he trying to sow discord between Mommy and us? A second later, Jack looked away. Standing behind the boys, Estella hid her hands behind her back guiltily and played with her fingers. So what are you going to do now, Mr. Damaris? How about I send you back home? Roxanne suggested. No need. I've already contacted the towing company. The driver will pick me up once they arrive, so I'll be staying here until then. All right, Roxanne responded, then began talking about work with him once more. The children kept their eyes on the adults alertly from the side. Sensing Archie's and Benny's gaze, Jack frowned as though he thought of something. Then he pondered the matter further and realized he might have acted too antagonistically toward the two. Roxanne, perplexed by the strange changes in his expression, asked, what's the matter? Jack recomposed himself and shook his head with a smile. It's nothing. I'm probably overthinking things. Despite his words, he was still visibly distracted when they resumed their conversation. After the driver called Jack, Roxanne sent him out. The children didn't follow her. Before he entered the car, Jack stopped, appearing as though he had something to say. Roxanne's heart sank as she waited for him to speak. I have something I'm not sure if I should mention. Jack sounded hesitant. Roxanne nodded, hinting him to continue. Jack furrowed his brows. I want to preface that what I'm about to say doesn't come from a place of animosity. However, for some reason, the children seem to have a very hostile attitude toward me. They're likely the only people who had access to my car before my tire was punctured. Roxanne's heart dropped violently. I do remember asking the children to play outside in the morning. They could have sabotaged his car during that period. And he's right about the children's antagonism toward him. Roxanne's thoughts were in disarray. Still, she defended the children against Jack's accusation. You're overthinking it, Mr. Damaris. There's no way these young children can do something like this. Besides, you're assuming they have the strength to pull this off, a strength that they may not possess." Jack smiled indifferently. It was just a guess. Besides, as I said, I'm not harboring any animosity toward them. It'll be great if that's not the case." Roxanne forced a smile. After Jack left, she returned to the mansion with a complicated expression. The children were huddled together, discussing Roxanne's relationship with Jack and how they could force him to leave far away from her. They dispersed immediately when they saw Roxanne entering. On her way back, she kept thinking about Jack's words. Upon closing the door behind her, she sat next to the children. Mommy, Miss Jarvis." The children promptly gathered around her. Instead of responding to or looking at them, Roxanne lowered her eyes and asked, "Did you all know about Mr. Damaris' punctured tire?" The children nodded innocently because that was the first thing Jack had mentioned when he returned to the house. Roxanne studied the children's expressions. "Do you know who did it, then?" The children's faces stiffened. Pursing their lips, the boys answered, "We may not like Mr. Damaris, but we wouldn't do something like that." Suddenly, they recalled something. Their eyes glinted, and they quietly shielded Estella behind them. However, Roxanne was only suspicious of her sons and not the girl. I don't like dishonest children. I'll give you all one more chance. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll check the surveillance footage. I'll be very upset if I discover you have been lying." Frowning, Archie grabbed his mother's shirt. We really didn't do it, Mommy. Don't check the surveillance footage." Benny chimed in. The three of us were together. We didn't do it."
I'm sorry."
"Please don't be upset with me, Miss Jarvis," Estella piped up right then. The girl panicked when she heard the last sentence Roxanne uttered, because the only thing she was afraid of was getting resented by Roxanne. Roxanne was stunned as she looked at Estella. The girl's cheeks reddened as she teared up. She looked as though she would cry the next moment. It's all my fault. Please don't be mad at Archie and Benny, Miss Jarvis," Estella sobbed. I sneaked out and did it. They don't know anything about it. I know what I did wrong now, so please don't hate me, Miss Jarvis." Roxanne was so astonished that she had no idea what to do. "I suspected the boys to be behind this after what Jack told me. After all, they tend to be mischievous. I didn't at all anticipate Essie to be responsible. My initial plan was to punish whoever was the culprit, but seeing how hard Essie is crying right now, I don't think I can do it. Besides, I don't have the right to either way. It's our fault, Mommy. We didn't keep a close eye on Essie." The boys had already guessed the truth when their mother questioned them. Even though Estella had admitted to the offense, they still wanted to take the blame for her mistake. Roxanne did not know what to say as she watched the three of them protect each other. I would have been contented to see them caring for each other in another situation, but they're covering for each other at the wrong time now. What do I do? Moments later, she suppressed her emotions and placed Estella on her thighs. Tell me the truth, Essie. Did you do this by yourself or with the boys?" As Estella had learned that Roxanne disliked dishonest children, she, of course, wasn't going to lie. Besides, she never wanted to drag the brothers down with her either. I did it by myself," she choked out. Roxanne nodded and wiped the girl's tears away. Why did you do it?" Even though the girl was crying intensely, she still answered the question. Because I don't like Mr. Damaris." It was the justification Roxanne expected but didn't want to hear. When Mr. Damaris gifted you flowers, you accepted it. But when Daddy did it, you tried to return it to him. Also, you always argue with Daddy and rarely smile at him. Yet, you keep smiling at Mr. Damaris. Estella listed everything she despised about Jack. The more Roxanne listened to the girl, the lower her heart sank. I have no clue Essie is capable of such fierce jealousy at a young age, and it's all because she's very attached to me. Estella tugged at Roxanne's shirt pitifully and added, I only want you to be with Daddy and become my mommy. Please don't hate me, Miss Jarvis. Feeling a little dumbstruck, Roxanne patted the girl's head. She's too attached to me. And it's our fault, Mommy. If we hadn't spoken badly about Mr. Damaris, Essie wouldn't have had a prejudice against him. Archie and Benny pleaded on Estella's behalf. Roxanne sighed. You two did do something wrong, but this has nothing to do with either of you. The brothers knitted their eyebrows and stared at their mother. They didn't want Estella to be punished. Roxanne turned to look at Estella, whose face was wet with tears. I know what you're thinking, but this isn't right. No matter how much you like or dislike someone, you can't touch their stuff just because you want to. Destroying other people's property is even worse. Do you understand? Estella hiccuped and nodded obediently. Then Roxanne turned to the boys. As for you two, Archie and Benny straightened up. I know you care for Essie, but you can't always cover for her. You must set good examples for her to follow. Don't do anything bad, and don't speak ill of others behind their backs, Roxanne advised. The brothers bobbed their heads and said, we know what we did wrong now. It won't happen again. Roxanne nodded and removed Estella from her embrace. Now that you three know your mistakes, it's time to accept your punishments.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.